there's a feeling of an agenda to get rid of oil and gas in this country.
Is that a feeling?
It's a well,
We're moving to a fact at this point. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Faisal Karmali. Welcome to Karmali Exchange. Business owners need to help each other out.
Keep on pushing to meet the needs of the customer will meet the needs of the business.
Welcome to Karmali Exchange. And well, let's talk about investing. Let's talk about businesses growing. Let's talk about a shift that kind of goes against what the norm is in your area. How do you thrive in that type of world? Well, let's talk about some of the most controversial topics right now in the world. And I have Jess Douglas, Chief Executive Officer and Director of Green Impact Partners. And I use the word green, Jesse. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate you having you on. I mean, that's a big topic, right? It's what does green mean? What is green? What should we be doing? How do we measure what we're doing? Are we even measuring all the things that we can be doing?
We've looked at your journey from Wolverine Energy all the way into where you are with Green Impact. There is a big, fantastic movement that you're having. You've cornered a great piece of the market when it comes to using natural gas. And I think a lot of the movement that's happening towards, let's quote unquote, green, the economy, the environment, the natural gas has kind of been an opportunity, but hasn't been the primary target of what you hear in the media. And so walk me through why natural gas has been an area where you think is the opportunity for, let's call it a greener environment.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you're at, natural gas is a very readily available, easy fuel that can be used in a home, in major power generation. It can be burned super clean, and it's a great replacement for coal. The U.S. has made huge strides in reducing their kind of per capita emissions numbers by using natural gas. It's you can convert some of those existing power generation facilities straight to it. There's just so many great uses. And then for what we do, we're into renewable natural gas. So we're taking and capturing methane, which is then a drop into that nat gas system, which cleans up the whole system. You're not looking at new transmission. You're not looking at new pipelines. You're not looking at new infrastructure. You're not looking at a new vehicle or a new engine or new driver to burn it. Everything works. For me, one of the biggest things is that we forget about how impactful to the environment the infrastructure that we build is, and forgoing the current infrastructure. And certainly it's not measured right now, right? If we're going to electrify everything and we're going to double or triple or even more, depending on how much power data takes, we're going to need a lot more power infrastructure. And that's not without environmental impact.
Yeah, when you start talking about the whole electrification of the economy, and that's all we really hear on a media perspective. You're hearing more and more governments and other agencies talking about, let's get electric vehicles out there. Let's make sure we're electrifying the economy. Let's get rid of the bad energy such as oil and natural gas. And that frustrates me because that's not without A, proper science, B, it's, in my terms, just an agenda that they're getting across. You've got a lot of headwind against you because in theory, a lot of people say that natural gas is not, and renewable natural gas is not on the forefront. It's all electric, it's all solar and wind. And you're in the renewable natural gas side. That's a big headwind. You're fighting against a big media push in a business that's thriving. How do you do that?
What I tell our people all the time is that when you're doing the right thing and you're measuring it, doesn't matter if there's a headwind there. We can run against that wind forever because we are doing the right thing and we're measuring it. When you look at a renewable natural gas from farm waste projects, which is primarily what we do, whether it's aggregated grains or manures or anything like that, they are by the generally accepted measure right now, which, by the way, wind and solar are not required to adhere to, the generally accepted measure. They get an automatic zero. By the generally accepted measure that you would measure every project by, they are carbon intensity negative. You're doing the right thing. On the life cycle basis of your project, you're removing more emissions than you're creating, including the burning of it on the other end. So if you can add into the grid something that doesn't require that replacement, doesn't require the build of batteries, doesn't require anything to use, and it reduces emissions, you're doing the right thing. So no matter what media says, if you're doing the right thing, you should keep doing it. And if you do it profitably, you can do it for a long time.
So Jesse, that sounds like a lot of work from an educational perspective, because what you just said in the last 15 seconds is more information than the average business owner, politician, policy creator actually puts on paper. So how much education do you have to do versus actually running the business?
It's a huge part. I mean, it's why I'm here. I really appreciate you having me on, and it's a big piece of what we do. It's educating government agencies, and certainly we've tried with some of some of our government agencies. I wouldn't say we've had success in all points. Sometimes they stare at me and say, it's too hard to measure everything. And I said, well, you can measure oil and gas right now. So if you can measure oil and gas and you can measure biofuels, why can't you measure wind, solar, and hydro?
Yeah.
When you get a blank stare, you know that they already know that, right? And so you're not always educating, you're just challenging some of those questions. But we do have to educate the general public and encourage them to read where it's there. And any opportunity that someone will give me to speak, I'll be there, and certainly we will be challenging the status quo as to what's happening and provide you with some good data points as to how clean natural gas itself can be and how clean renewable natural gas and how clean the entire system can be when you dump it. And it is a step change cleaner than wind and solar can be if you do it right.
Your business and your industry is going through what a lot of the health industry and food industry had to go through when they start bringing out products or services to the market. There's a lot of education that's required. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles to go through, and there's a lot of government programs. What are your thoughts behind industries in general, and I'm going to use this term, getting government handouts to promote what your industry or other industries are promoting?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm not in favor of it. I feel like when you've got a government agenda to what's happening that isn't based around just doing the right thing, and you create weird measurements, right? Like Canada's looking to reduce its emissions based on a previous measurement in time, even though our population might double, and there's a whole need for talking about displaced emissions in the rest of the world and what we could do better as Canadians and how building the Canadian economy and improving productivity would reduce per capita emissions immensely. If you're using the wrong measurement, it's there. And so I think when a government is providing handouts to hand-picked industries and players within those industries to communicate a message that's consistent with what a few individuals have chosen. And in Canada right now, typically those few individuals are voted by a very minority portion of the population. It's tough to say that that's a message you want getting out there.
Yeah, and it will be tough. I think it's going to be a big challenge. First of all, when you look at the renewable side, you look at how much money is being built into these programs, into these businesses. And then when I look at all of the, at least publicly traded companies, how much profit comes out at the bottom line, it's fairly new from a profit perspective. Not too many companies make a profit in this. So it's more hopes, dreams, and wishes than it is actual profit. How do you determine which ones are profitable, which ones are not? And I understand there's math behind this, but there's going to be a lot of projects out there that are a waste, and especially when there's taxpayers, and it's primarily on the business owner's tax side. It's not the individual. There's a lot of credits for the individual citizen and less for the business owner. They're the ones paying to go into these programs where these programs are not providing a profit. And you can just take a look at some pipelines that the federal government recently purchased, and it's going to be a long time before they get $34 billion back from that.
Yeah.
So how do you verify that it's worth it? Like there's so many renewable projects that are they're just a waste of investment.
Not only that, so one of the things I've been challenging right now is you can make anything, maybe that's too strong of a term. You can make a lot of things work from an economic, financial perspective. And so one of the terms that we challenge people on is environmentally economic. Are you making a difference? Is what you're doing actually doing it? Like if you were environmentally economic first, at least then if you said, you know what, Western society should pay a little more to develop technologies and do things that can be exported in the rest of the world, I can get behind that. I can even, and I take a lot of heat from this, including from my wife, I do believe a properly implemented carbon tax is a good way to encourage and change behavior and take those dollars and reinvest them or continue to have them invested in technologies that can change the world. Problem we have now is I don't believe for a second that we're even close to a properly implemented carbon tax, nor are we distributing the capital into appropriate reinvestment that would get there. But I do think that there are few levers government has, and if they use that properly and forced all types of energy to be measured on the same system, and that would be properly implemented, and you would change behavior really well.
And I think that's the key thing. When you said that you're in favor of the carbon tax, I'm sure people went, "Oh shit, here we go." Now, then you actually say you got to properly quantify it, and that's the problem. They've lumped industries like yours into 3 letters, ESG, and they say, "Okay, here, environmental, boom, let's take it, part of the ESG process, and governance and social impact, and all are all now one big group." And that kind of, I think, is stupid. Let's break it down to it, and let's see what's the right opportunity. But there needs to be quantifying ways to measure impact, economic and environmental impact, and not just economic and environmental, but also, is that the value system of that culture, of that society? Here in this country, we're fortunate enough to be where we're at. There's a lot of countries who we try to implement our views on, and it's not the right thing in their journey, because they're not as developed in their economic systems as we are. But for us to organically put out some sort of target, without having proper quantified numbers, really piss off a lot of business owners, because they're the ones that have to pay it. So when you say carbon tax, it's going to be on the backs of the business owners, not the individual. And so how does that work? How do businesses sit down with you and say, "Oh, you're in this business and you're pro-taxing me, my business, to help the greater good in that viewpoint"? How do you justify that?
Don't get me wrong. I do take a lot of heat from most of my good friends. I'm an Albertan. I've been born and raised, and so most of my good friends are business owners in Alberta, and not in the same space as I'm in. Right? It's a newer space, so they're in traditional energy. They're in manufacturing, and I sort of say to them, like, a properly implemented carbon tax will give you incentive to change your behavior. And you can, right? As a business, you can be better with your lighting. You can be better with your heating. You can be better with your building, and you can make capital investments that make change. If we encourage and use some of that carbon tax to encourage better energy systems that can be used and exported, I think there's very little argument. I very rarely, not never, but very rarely would get into an argument with anyone that says we're not going to need more food and more energy.
Yeah.
So I think if we can find ways to get that energy cheaper and faster and better and consumed better, there's some basis to that. I mean, especially as Canadians, we already pay a bunch of tax. I'd happily reduce income tax in a bunch of ways and move it into taxes that encourage behaviors that we want to see.
A behavioral tax.
Right? Like, yeah. We already see spending taxes. We know they're super efficient. It's the same thing, and you can run your business. It becomes a competitive advantage for some of those businesses that are better, are more creative, and are willing and have the ability to invest in CapEx to do it in a better way. So it's not all just cost.
So Jesse, there's a feeling of an agenda to get rid of oil and gas in this country. At least
is that a feeling?
It's
we're moving to a fact at this point.
Do you believe that do you think it's a government push, or do you think it's a different group or an association that's pushing that? Where is that coming from? Is that an agenda from whom?
I'll tell you a little story. So one of the projects we're building, our flagship project, captures about half a billion tons a year of CO2. And there's actually uses. It's biogenic CO2. It can be cleaned up. It can be used in food and beverage. It can be used in, like, the uses for it are immense. And the current government policy doesn't allow use of it without very financially penalizing us. So we're going to put it down whole, because I tried to fight that battle. I tried to get near and said, hey, like, look how much better for the environment it is for us to do this. I don't want to be better off financially. In fact, I'll give the CO2 to someone. I just want to be not worse off financially than if I put it down whole. No, totally deaf ears. So I do believe we've got some pretty, I don't want to be too insulting with what I say here, but I think we've got an agenda from some people that have decided that electrification is the right way to go, and certain ways to electrify. And whether or not they're specifically against oil and gas, or they just think that that's better, there is no doubt that almost every policy we've seen related to the environment right now is moving to a stop oil and gas and use electrification via wind, solar, and hydro.
That agenda, we hear a lot when you're speaking to certain politicians at different levels of government, more so outside of the prairie provinces than inside the prairie provinces. You're rarely going to hear, let's electrify everything from a prairie province because of our natural gas. So we are biased. This is one of our industries and a very strong part of our economy. When you come from a federal government who has a different view in many's understanding of how they want to literally get rid of oil and gas and say we don't need this resource anymore, how do you fight that? This is a government that has a mandate potentially, and I'm not saying they do. I'm saying this is what we're hearing. Okay, that the federal government has a mandate, according to many, to literally fuck over the oil and gas industry because they want to get rid of it. They want to exit out of that. I don't know what was I can't remember what was the last industry that there was literally a federal mandate to get rid of it besides asbestos.
Yeah, right. And that stroke of pen legislation is fairly easy.
Right.
It wasn't, yeah.
So how do you fight that fight with A, you're in a province that doesn't have a lot of seats in the parliament. B, you're part of an industry that, quote unquote, a lot of people don't like. C, you're hearing from politicians that they should stop investing in these areas and start looking outside, but invest in our own country domestically, which is kind of like an oxymoron, in my opinion. So how do you fight that fight when you've got that whole set of group of people that are very powerful, very influential, that can create policy that can really screw over a lot of provinces?
Yeah, do the right thing and keep educating. Alberta born and raised. I mean, a lot of our business and a lot of our investment that was related to cleaning up oil and gas, because it felt like, you said feeling, it probably felt like or is, we've got some of the cleanest, safest, most accessible oil and gas in the world, energy in the world, right? We're talking about 12, 13 barrels per person that are getting consumed in the developed world. Like, this is the world's largest form of consumed energy is oil and gas. We need it. And it felt like the world didn't want Alberta's. So we were looking for ways like, how can we really make it a step change better than the rest of the world? And that's where we ended up down the biofuels route. You are doing the right thing. You are making energy that's cleaner not just by a little bit, but by a wide margin than wind, solar, and hydro. And if it's actually measurably cleaner, by the measurements that the California Air Resources Board pioneered and they put into the clean fuel and the CFR in Canada. So they're generally accepted measurement tools. That's what the group that, if we say that they want to get rid of oil and gas, the group that wanted to get rid of oil and gas created this measurement. If we can be meaningfully better than the forms of energy they're telling us we should use and continue to push that education, I think we have a chance. And that's why we're in the business we are in, is because it's completely drop into oil and gas. And you can, in fact, if you could get enough of it into that system, you could make oil and gas just as clean as any form of renewables that are being pushed right now.
I've never met a CEO that says my industry is screwed in 5 years. So I'm not going to ask you how you're going to feel about your business in 5 years. But let's talk about the industry of natural gas, of energy, and of renewable energy. Where do you see it 5 years from now?
I think we're naive to think we're going to consume less oil and gas in the near future. We're not specifically in the gas or oil business, but I just think that if anyone thinks that we have a good viable replacement, I haven't seen it. Right. And so if we still stay on the thesis that we need more energy, well, how are we going to fulfill that with other things? And I think that's why we think that there's nearly infinite growth available to our business, is that if you need more food and you need more energy, we are cleaning up both the farming industry and the energy industry. How can that be the wrong thing to do? We can make food more profitable and cleaner. And I mean, there's a huge amount of argument in the US about the ethanol business, the corn-based ethanol. It's taking food for fuel, it's doing things. But what people don't realize is that they're using barely any more land to grow that corn right now. And they're getting 5 times the yield in corn because they made farming profitable by making it an ethanol feedstock. When you do more, you get more innovation, you get bigger business in there. And there's this anti-Canadian rhetoric, certainly against big business and how they're the man is going to get you. That's not the truth. There's some of that, but there's not every business has got a great purpose and a great path. But for the most part, to be long-term competitive, you have to. And so let's make things profitable for them if they do it right.
Here's something I have talked to our provincial members of legislation. And I have said to these ministers, I've said, we are terrible in the promotions business. We are terrible at sharing the good news story of this province. We're terrible at sharing the benefits of what we do globally, especially in provinces that are not in favor of what some of the natural resources and renewable energy programs that we can bring from this province alone. Forget about outside of this province. What we did a very good job was promoting the fact that if you live in Ontario or BC, move to Alberta, it's cheaper. That went pretty good.
It was a good campaign. Yeah.
And we didn't learn from that by saying maybe we should talk about and educate the people who vote in more populated provinces to drive the change. What needs to happen, A, from business owners, and B, from Albertans, to share that information so that we can get this moved to the top of the agenda versus being the evil of the country, as some people call it.
Yeah, I wish there was a silver bullet answer there. But I think one of the things, certainly like Larry Fink and Warren Buffett and those guys have readership in their annual address to shareholders, right? Both written and oral in what they do. And they get to say a lot of things. And I think if Alberta started to create an impact to the country, impact to the world annual statement that they could even update quarterly, if you could get some readership behind that to say, hey, look, we paid this much in taxes. We helped the region, the country by this much. We were this percentage of exports. We grew at this pace. We created wealth. We removed poverty. If you could talk about all of the points in how a province that is wealthy and is generating and continually generating more wealth is actually better than those around it, people like to hear that, right? Like, it's that people invest in Berkshire Hathaway because of what they've done for decades. And Alberta is the same story. What have we done for decades? How much cleaner is the Canadian oil and gas system and is Alberta-based oil than it was 20 years ago? Like, these are all things that nobody really knows. And we've just got to keep telling them in a very factual, well-presented, look what we did way.
Jesse, from your lips to Ottawa's ears, we hope this really works out. I'm really happy to have you on the show because there's not a lot of people whose industry and business is facing a political and environmental headwind at the exact same time and causing not only a lot of waves, but a lot of opportunity. Jesse, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you for watching the Karmali Exchange. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. You can also follow me on social media at Faisal Karmali, where we can continue the business conversation.